Hello again. Shabbat Shalom. We're waiting for Alexey Arestovych to join us. We are not waiting for him anymore. He already joined, and here he is, connected with the best radio, military political observer from Ukraine. Hello, Alexey. Glad to see you again in our stream. And the first topic that we discussed today is, of course, the hottest. And we want to hear your reaction to the visit of Hamas to Moscow. I think the last of the group who were siding with neutrality towards Russia, they are finally quieted by that visit and reception. Well, right, Putin had chosen a side. That side follows the logic of that axis of evil: Pyongyang, Beijing, Tehran, Moscow. And Hamas is now being received in Moscow, the guys who did all these horrible things in Israel. But it follows with his logic because he is the political leader who gave rewards to the 64th Brigade, which did all these atrocities in Bucha. So he generally follows the logic that he is implementing in life. And Israel, congratulations with awakening in regards to who really is Russian Federation under Vladimir Putin. Yeah, right. We knew that. It's just for our government, it probably became a surprise. Right, some people were not exactly sure. And we've been criticizing our government quite a bit for not supplying arms to Ukraine, and you were always protecting our government. Well, the matter is not in the weapons and arms to Ukraine. It's more about the general position that Israel was taking. And general flexibility in this matter was all right, was actually correct until Moscow sided with the axis of evil, while Israel government actually had a chance to maneuver between different sides, different countries that have interests in the region. It did, and that was fine. But now that Russia had finally decided which side it is on, then it changes, I think. And of course, nobody will forget in Israel the government leaders with that orange-black ribbon together with Putin in Moscow. And I don't think Israel was the country that had chosen the side. I think Putin choosing the side of those axes of evil, he basically pushed Israel to the other side. Well, that's surprising, right? He has a lot of Jewish friends in his surroundings. Right, we're going back to that same discussion. Exactly. This is a classic beginning of every anti-Semite. No, I actually treat Jews fine. I even have a friend who is a Jew, but... And all these endless anti-Semitic statements by both Putin and his foreign minister Lavrov, and now he invited Hamas for a reception. Even Erdogan refused to receive them on the government level. Erdogan did make a statement that he doesn't consider Hamas to be terrorists, and it escalates situation with Israel, and he also makes other decisions and demonstrates certain pan-Islamic unity with some of these elements, but he still did not receive them. And Putin instead did give a warm welcome to Hamas, to the murderers who killed your fathers, grandfathers, children, mothers, your girls. What else does one need in the face of Putin? It's a rhetorical question. What else does one need to understand what a creature Putin really is? This is probably addressing those people at the government who might eventually think that, well, probably we should not be so harsh about Russia. No, I think our government finally starts to understand, especially that now there is some news surfacing that denial of service attack was also organized supposedly by Russia at the time when Hamas attacked Israel to complicate communications. So we do want to hear another opinion from you, Alexei. It's been a year and 8 months of war in Ukraine. We do want to hear from you. What do you think about high expectations? I do hope that our government indeed satisfies these high expectations, but from the very beginning, the plank was risen so high that I don't know how achievable it is that we will destroy Hamas and we will liberate the hostages. Today, I think people start to sober up that it's probably two goals that are contradicting each other and that results will be much smaller. But our government still climbed that tallest branch of the tree, and we do hope that they will succeed. But I think there could be some parallels drawn with Ukraine at the beginning, since the moment when you actually pushed Russia back. And now we hear the same statements here that, oh, well, we'll show them what they have never seen. So, what are we going to show them? They've seen everything that we have. And I don't know, maybe just a higher intensity of the same things. And military also have certain limitations. What do you think about these expectations? Well, one can say that Israel is not fully subjective here, fully a subject in this situation as Ukraine, because immediately after the conflict, there are two aircraft carriers sent by Biden over here. Uh, and it almost gives me a feeling that they're also watching over Israel, not only over Hezbollah. And from the Western side, there is definite pressure about rescuing hostages because not a single Western politician can deal with opposition if he comes out and says, well, we need to destroy Hamas, so we don't care about those 20 hostages. One can understand that Hamas made a very strategic move by capturing those hostages from different countries. And despite all these special forces, even from Germany, being sent over, we understand that this factor definitely slows down everything. Plus, there is a risk of a big war in the Middle East. It also slows things down. And this is happening on the background of a very high plank, very high threshold set by Netanyahu, who said that yes, we will destroy Hamas, it will cease to exist. Well, right, and majority of Israelis still believe that. Of course they do, but what day it is after the beginning of the conflict, after the hostages were captured? I think it's 20th, 21st, right? Just like, so see, like David Gindelman said, if the dog violated something, you need to punish the dog immediately. If you do it 2 hours later, it won't understand why you're hitting it, why you're punishing it. So all these discussions, are we doing that operation? What are we doing with hostages? What about water, electricity? All the war classics are saying that the war likes speed. Without speed, it changes into something else. There are new allies pop up on both sides. Everybody comes and makes statements and prepares to different things. And Israel, which set the plank so high, is now starting to bog down in all these circumstances. And with all my respect to the unity of people and the country of Israel, I don't think Israel can actually disregard the public opinion, the global public opinion, because Israel depends upon a lot of things supplied from and a lot of things on the global market. Well, Alexey, but there's still got to be some military preparations right before the operation starts. There has to be some prep work. No, war is a continuation of politics, and sometimes military have to sacrifice some military principles for politics. Yeah, no, but we're not talking about principles. We're talking about human lives. And in Israel, every life of every soldier is precious. I want to assure you that this is a thing that goes both ways. While you guys are preparing to attack Hamas positions in Gaza, Hamas is also preparing to repel your attack. They're not sitting there doing nothing. They're setting mines in different houses. They're figuring out other surprises for you. It never happens like this when you prepare for a conflict and your enemy doesn't. So they are preparing, and Israeli soldiers will have to pay with their lives for whatever will be achieved. And these statements, we will destroy you utterly, that Israeli government did, technically should have a way to escalate further. That, after such a loud statement, and then it's bombing, 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 and then Hamas comes out and says, well, you're destroying our civilians. So it's not exactly a proper escalation route. And we're talking about how it is seen from a side. And it's been seen as Israel has lost the initiative. Americans have initiative. Those people that press and countries that press Israel from different sides have some initiative. Even Harvard students have some initiative. And Israel is working the agenda of bombing Gaza to prepare it for a ground offensive. Can Israel allow itself to lose initiative? I have a big question about that. It should have taken different diplomatic actions to take initiative while Israel now is defending itself, which is a big problem. Even Suvorov mentioned hundreds of years ago, always hit, never defend. And I understand, of course, it is difficult for Netanyahu to guide it with a coalition when it hinges on three congressmen. It's difficult, right? But that's what happened in Ukraine too. You can either be driven by meaning or by emotions. And Israeli government allowed itself to be driven by emotions for a little bit because you don't have an ultimate answer what to do with Hamas. Same as we don't have in Ukraine an answer what to do ultimately with Russia. And the West doesn't know what to do with Russia. And that inability to give and set the final goal of their politics makes you as an object in the process. You stop being a subject. And this is bad. Your enemy has the initiative, not you. We are trying to take the initiative back, our counteroffensive, which generally failed. Now we're sitting in defense, right? Strategic defense, but still. You guys are not really defending, but still you are allowing Hamas to attack you on the information front. And yes, your ambassador in the United Nations shows a rock, and you make other statements, good statements too, but this is not the strategic initiative. This is defending. To have the strategic initiative, you would have to enter Gaza. Other opportunities? You mean like leaving United Nations? Would that be an option? Well, you guys need to think and calculate options, right? I don't think we'll leave United Nations. Exactly, it is not too smart to do that, but you could initiate a certain international congress on this regard. You need to keep attacking. You know what Boyd's loop is? You know how it works? Well, tell us. Boyd was an American pilot who was fighting during Korean War, and that's when the jets, when the military airplanes became actual jets, and their speed increased from about 600 kilometers an hour to up to 900 kilometers an hour, 800, 900 kilometers. Those 200 kilometers, they actually pushed some limits of physiology of the pilots, and pilots started reacting differently, so the logic of the air battle changed. And basically, Boyd's loop talks about when the first pilot sees the other pilot first, the enemy first, and he makes a decision and starts to go and intercept course. The second one makes a decision later, and that cascade of decisions lagging behind basically tells that if the second pilot that is being targeted misses the third decision made by first pilot, he will never recover the situation. He will ultimately lose. And this is being taught in business as well. It's rather aggressive position. You need to keep making decisions to make sure your enemy loses initiative and is getting smitten. An initiative can be different. You can put the question of leaving United Nations, not actually leave, but you can pose the question of what if we do that? You can turn to Hague Tribunal about military crimes. You can request a separate tribunal about Hamas crimes in the south, a separate international tribunal. You can attack Hezbollah as well. Well, yeah, you guys are already working on Hezbollah as much as you can, and you're working on the airports in Damascus and Aleppo, not letting Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs land there. So your strategy needs to be ahead of the actions of the enemy. It's often, Hamas is often neglected on the political arena, but look how masterfully they play the public opinion here. And this incident or tragedy, however you call it, with the hospital, where there were dozens of people who died. It was a parking lot, not the hospital itself, right? But Hamas managed to write Israel on a page of criminals. And this until this was misproven, but even then it left an aftertaste in some media. So things like that, you need to prevent that. You need to be the ones attacking, not letting them do it. Alexey, so speaking of the parking lot in Gaza, by the way, on BBC, I've seen an interview today with one of the political bureau of Hamas. He was starting being asked questions. He was asked questions about the killings and murders that they've said started in Israel. He refused to communicate and he took the mic off. But it's interesting, right? That BBC position generally is changing. Well, EU resolution was rather stern. Hamas, I don't think, expected such a stern resolution because a lot of Hamas sponsors actually took side of Israel. The countries that were somewhat in favor of Palestine and all. And I would say, look at the manifestations, at the protests in Europe, how harshly they're being dispelled, all the pro Hamas protests. But for example, let's look at more things. Tomorrow on Malta, there is a formula of peace starting. We, as Ukraine, we did another one before in Jeddah. We are appealing to the International Tribunal. We're appealing to International Criminal Court in Hague. We're working with United Nations. Our General Prosecutor's Office is working with international partners. And it's difficult for the international society to ignore Ukraine. One can say that we also have a lot of emotions, but at least on the emotional level, we're doing a lot of things that do not let people forget about Ukraine, do not let politicians forget about our situation. So we're suggesting different formulas. If they disagree with that, we continue discussion, asking, okay, what would you agree with? What do you think? What needs to be remedied? And right now, Israel is obviously doing a lot of negotiations behind the scenes because the threat of international war in the Middle East is also looming there. But I think on this backdrop, I don't know if that's lack of resources, they're just 24 hours a day, and Israel government doesn't have enough resources, and maybe prime minister and his supporters don't have enough effort. No, we think he's weak. Yeah, well, but he still would need then to create special committees, or if he has opposition, opposition can go for that and creates special Israeli commissions and work on this arena, because otherwise your joint enemy will win, and they have millions of voices, and Israel only has dozens. I don't know. Did Israel initiate a United Nations session related to the attempt to genocide Israeli people in the south taken by Hamas? No, I don't think we did. Exactly, not a good point. Not a good point for Israel. You guys should have tried that. Well, no, not everybody is in agreement with Israel in the United Nations. I think Gutierrez also formulated his attitude, which is not in our favor. Right. So, formula of victory, Alexei. I think in Ukraine, this also is not defined yet. Maybe you will get to the borders of 91, but what will happen after? Will it be victory, or does Ukraine need to take Moscow in order to be victorious? So, initially, our message was our victory will be basically similar to victory to our flag over Germany's Reichstag in the Second World War, right? But right now we're looking at the reality, and I don't think that it will be how. What do you think? I think decision will be found, but it'll be found situationally. Negotiations are being conducted, and my personal opinion, you still need to plant the flag on the last Hamas bunker, and you do need to win by the American principle in the Second World War, when all the soldiers of the enemy are killed and all their things are broken. And after that, you can become kind and say, yes, we're ready to discuss now. Now we have mood to discuss, negotiate peace. Do you think it's a possible variant? Well, the fact that Israeli army can do it technically, I'm absolutely sure. But Hamas, let me describe you this. Hamas is the weakest opponent, weakest enemy of Israel right now. And if you don't punish the weakest opponent, then the other, the stronger ones, will say, uh-oh, so Hamas managed to get away with this. We're much stronger, so now we can do much better. That's why the punishment for Hamas needs to be so exemplary that everybody else who might have had this in mind would shrug in fear and say, no, we're not going there. Well, that's why you guys are basically in the corner. Whether you like it or not, you need to destroy Hamas in its entirety and not do the ground operation, but even do the underground operation. And if you don't do it, it'll be worse. Maybe not immediately, but it will get worse for you. That's why Hamas needs to be absolutely destroyed. You need to be careful about citizens and civilians to a degree it's possible. So, do you think our biggest enemies will be able to refuse from their plans, looking at what we do with Hamas? Because we know that Iran is behind all that, and they started one front, and they're looking at the fruit of this action. And if indeed we are sternly responding and destroying Hamas, do you think Iran may stop and may put a pause on their thoughts? Well, no, I don't think so. I think they'll give an order to Hezbollah to join the fight, but then you'll have to destroy Hezbollah as well. But what other option do you have? Indeed, we don't really have much options. But if Israel would put its flag on the last bunker and then without any political agreement later will just withdraw from Gaza, would that be a solution? And let them do whatever they want? No, no, you shouldn't leave. You should leave. You should plant proper occupation administration there. Make sure you provide humanitarian aid, invite media, show how you save civilians and Arab children, and you need to be helping and saving as well. And then take EU, take United Nations, bring peacekeepers, start building support system for refugees, and to do all the proper actions that are expected of a country towards refugees. But everybody needs to understand that whoever touches Israel will not live to see the third sunrise. Because Israel, I think, has been around for about 70 years, 2 times 35, right? First 35 years, Israel lived according to that law, and the next 35 years, Israel lived with a paradigm of let's weather it out, maybe they'll come down and they stop killing us. And it's just terrorists that are disrupting everything. But there are actually good civilians too who want to learn Jewish language, who want to settle and live in peace in Israel, right? But it didn't prevail. They did not change the situation. So now you're at a question where you need to, at a crossroad where you need to choose the third path. So a third path should be a combination. Sorry for quoting Apostle Paul, Christianity in Israeli stream, but one needs to be simple as a dove and wise as a snake. Combining all these features in yourself and even giving the right videos, showing your jet dropping a high precision munition on Hamas bunker, and then showing your doctors treating and aiding Palestinian children. Alexey, do you know that in many hospitals, indeed right now, including the 7th of October, there were those Palestinian kids getting medical aid with their mothers. And these mothers were cheering up what was happening, that massacre that was happening on the 7th, that their compatriots attacked and were killing Israelis. Nastya, but you still need to show that. You still need to send a message. Because who else knows about it besides Israelites and Arestovych, who understands a little bit about your things the way they work here? You need to send this message loud and clear to the whole world. I'll tell more, Alexei. We even treated the grandkid of Ismail Khani and the wife of Mahmoud Abbas. Right, and it is known to you, but is not known at large, so you need to keep showing it. Here is Israeli tank destroying Hamas position in Gaza, but here we are providing humanitarian aid. Here we're building another desalination facility. Here we're providing water and food. Here we're treating medically civilians. So the world needs to be fed this picture on and on and on. Enemies of Israel will need to get the message then that Israel will find a way to destroy those who are hiding behind the backs of women and children. And Israel will find ways to save, to heal, to treat, to educate all the civilians whom terrorists are using as life shields. Because Tzahal, Israeli army, is IDF, is the most humane army in the world. Well, problem, Alexei, is that these women still continue to hate Jews, and they will continue training their kids to eventually take arms and go kill Israelites. Well, but you don't have any choice, right? You think if we destroy Hamas, situation will change, right? Yeah, there is a path, a peace treaty between Israel, Egypt, Jordan, with all the difficult aspects of it and the desires of some of the countries who signed the peace accord to still poke at Israel from time to time. It still remedied the threat at large, and it blocked some actions directed against Israel. Not all of them, but many. So if you add Saudi Arabia and other countries to that accord, the rhetoric and everything would de-escalate step by step. It will take time, but this is a remote perspective. There's no close perspective, but the remote perspective of all that peace, mutual peace accord in the area is being set by the fact that all these countries need to understand that whoever attacks Israel will not stay alive. Sooner or later, Israel will get them. And that actually does help peace negotiations and understanding of the moment for the politicians. Plus, look, Hamas is a phenomenon that exists only because the Gaza sector exists. If there was no Gaza, with its specific city planning, material and immaterial basis for its existence, starting with European and Qatar money that are being poured there and that Hamas is using to build its criminal economy, uh, down to the fact of that enclave and the way, the fashion it exists in. That enclave should cease to exist in that way. Then the Hamas will disappear. It's much easier to deal with the Western Bank, right? And right now you have two problems, the Gaza sector and the West Bank. So if the Gaza sector changes its shape, its societal, political, and otherwise shape, then Hamas would not be able to repeat that. If you change that and if you set a message that the Gaza sector is a terrorist organization, terrorist areas controlled by Hamas, so you need to resolve it. And when you may manage to get rid of the Gaza sector as a phenomenon, then you will have a much better situation in the West, in the Western Bank. There shouldn't be any production left by Hamas. There shouldn't be any Hamas militant looking at you and loading the weapon in the Gaza sector. Civilians may stay. They will be probably a different system of working with them, but civilians are different. They can be throwing dirty glances at you and they can be in disagreement with Israelites, but it's still a change of the historic landscape. Gaza should not remain as a terrorist cover for Hamas. That's the main task. I utterly agree. So another interesting opinion I want to discuss with you is criticizing your government during the times of war. Because here, right now, we all understand in this country that the government, army, and special services, they failed. They made a huge mistake in their work, which led to these casualties. And we have two opposing opinions. One part of society is saying, do not criticize government while there is still war going. Let's let them manage war and command army and make decisions. And others are already criticizing, especially families of hostages. They're saying things that the process has started. The process of criticism has definitely started. And when they're being told, let's discuss it after war, they're telling you, we have not even started yet. What will be after war, you can't even dream about. So what can you say about it? What critics, what society, what government is afraid in the face of criticism? So, they're afraid of breaking the societal unity. Okay, so they're afraid of using criticism to shape the politics. Well, from the government side, it's not done by prohibiting criticism, but it's done by changing your politics. You don't go to the critics and say, don't criticize me. No, you basically need to start doing the right political maneuvers, and then there's nothing to criticize. And that is not on people and the families of the hostages and the dead. This is on the shoulders of government that needs to be adequate. The government needs to come out and say, yes, we are guilty, and we will set up a commission after this war to investigate. We had a Agranats commission before, and people were removed from their positions, people were punished for wrong decisions and decisions that caused death. So we will do that. The government needs to come out with that message and say that they will adequately prosecute, and people will resign and somebody will go to jail. And for now, we're fighting for these and these goals. We will not change the heads of military intel and IDF and the guys who completely failed in preventing this attack. Even though I think the head of Shebet came out and took guilt on his shoulders, which is a brave step. He actually found courage in himself to make this step. But the logic is rather simple. I want to reiterate this message to Israeli people listening to us, that the man, I want to send a message that a military who made a mistake, he has a much higher motivation to atone for this mistake, to fix it, than the new one who being put on this place. Did you guys change Minister of Defense in Ukraine? We did, but you also can look at our opponents, at Russia. They have 6 army commanders under criminal investigations, and that does affect the decisions and the way they fight the wars. Near Avdiivka, you can see them fighting a different war. In a year and a half, they actually learned how to do some things. Initially, they failed all the strategic and tactical levels. Then they made several proper strategic decisions, which allowed them to go ahead. And we still were kicking them on the tactical and operative. But in the long term, now they're starting to get to our level on the tactical as well. And this is what time gives. This is what protracted war gives, that your opponent has enough time to make right decisions. And in our country, we then have still also a position do not criticize. So when you don't criticize, you don't evolve. And my position is to let people fight, to let those who lead the military procedures, military operations, let them finish the war. The government needs to come out and say, yes, these are the goals. Government needs to keep communicating with society, keep up their line of strategic communications. As somebody who worked with that, let me touch upon this topic. Strategic communication basically allows people to understand what's the strategic goal and where does every step falls in this path. So right now we would come and say, this is the strategic goal. We're doing this. This is how it helps with the general goal. Every missile, this does this. Every, for example, Palestinian kid in the Israeli hospital also achieves that general goal. Do you guys have such a conversation with society? No, we don't actually. I think we're somewhere at the beginning of this dialogue. Well, then the critique is inevitable. If there is no direct strategic communication from government, society will be demanding this communication from the bottom, and that turns out to be criticism. And the families who lost their family members or who still have their relatives hostage, they have the moral victory, the moral strength over the government, so their voice will be always louder. And what usual bureaucrat does in this situation, they cease communicating, and then criticism only gets harder. And this is a false idea to not criticize government during war. Government needs to act in a fashion that there would be less criticism. Because when mothers are looking at their children who were killed and burned and their grandmothers, grandfathers who were murdered, they want to scream, they want to send their message. And the government needs to understand that and do and act faster before and make decisions that would not make these people want to criticize. You need to come out and show what negotiations you're doing, why you're doing that, what is your end goal. You need to keep reiterating that Hamas will be completely destroyed. This is what we're doing militarily. We're doing forming operations and preparing our entry of military into the Gaza sector. And this should be a loud and clear message with the relatives of the dead and wounded, with those whose people are still hostage. And a biggest part of this message needs to be that, guys, Netanyahu and his people need to come out and say, guys, we will put in jail ourselves and everybody who is responsible, but we now need to make sure we finish this war first. Because there is a risk of escalation with Iran, and then there is one missile that hit somewhere on the Egyptian border, so Egypt is pissed. But if Hezbollah and Iran joins the fight, it'll be much harder than 1973. So let us fight in an adequate fashion. Let us communicate with you properly, and then we'll do all the punishment and all the investigations after this crisis is over. America and our allies will be with us, so we will work through to the point of that commission. We cannot promise you what will happen after, but we will get the situation under control. So I would, for example, come and address people and say, yes, I made a mistake. Yes, we will investigate and get everybody punished, including myself if need be. But right now, we need to continue this fight. We need to make sure we remedy the immediate threat. And after that, we'll create a special commission, which might come to a very unfavorable decision and maybe put me in jail for 20 years. But right now, let me talk to you and explain every step to you. And I'll be talking to the relatives. My people will be talking to your relatives. Come talk to us in person. I will not be hiding. I'll be listening to you, I don't know, every Monday at 10 o'clock. So that's a great message, Alexey. You're also saying that Russian army did change to be more effective, and I'm seeing that in the White House, John Kirby made a statement that they have information that Russian military are de facto execute soldiers which refuse to follow the orders. We also have information that Russian commanders threaten to execute the whole detachment if they are trying to withdraw from the fire of Ukrainian artillery. What in this regard? So not much changed in terms of special detachments killing soldiers for retreating from the front line. Well, yeah, there is a lot of proof, and one just needs to understand that Putin's regime is very effective. It's inhumane, but it's effective. So let's go on the slick eyes of psychology. Let's look at some of the people's psychologists here. Germans are very rationally outward, but inwardly they're very irrational. Nibelungs, Faust, Goethe, and then specifics of personal life of Germans, right? They indicate that. Russians are exact opposite of that. They are absolutely irrational outwardly, that mysterious Russian soul, etc. But internally, all the logic is very rational, to the degree that you almost feel that you're dealing with a robot. And I cannot name any irrational step. Yes, they are cannibalistic. Yes, they are horrible, but they are very rational. So in their paradigm, it is absolutely inhumane paradigm, but they're utterly rational. So that's why they kill their own soldiers who refuse to execute their orders, but they still keep fighting. And there is a good parameter that one wants to use if you want to understand what's happening on the front. You need to intercept their communications. Whoever is screaming more is losing, even if they're on the offensive. If you listen to the intercepts of Russian troops, even the ones that are being under our main attack vector, there are a lot of very calm voices. We're working. Ukrainians are moving, but we're working on them. So they do have people, they do have professionals who know how to fight. They have people who still fight there, and they don't fight for Putin. They fight for the grandeur of Russia the way they understand it. They have motivated people who fight well. And they're catching us for the fifth time in the same psychological trap. Just for this war, Avdiivka is town number 5 that's being taken in the same fashion as we've lost 4 before. Look what Russians allowed us to do. They allowed us to do ineffective or unsuccessful counteroffensive. They stretched us on the whole front from the north to the south, and then they attacked us near Avdiivka. And now we try to bring our troops towards Avdiivka to reinforce that vector, that part of the front. You know, I'm skeptical about our capability to hold it. If we do, that'll be a miracle. But for now, what we see on the front, usually these encirclements, you cannot hold such a perch. They usually fall eventually. But we'll see if we will get into the same story again. But one can tell they're learning. They made certain strategic decisions. They are learning on the tactical level as well. And with the Avdiivka offensive, we're actually facing a rather evolved enemy than the one we faced initially when they came here with the parade uniforms. And the ones that were looking for different ways to fight us during the last year. Look, when people think that Surovikin is a complete idiot, when he needed to withdraw from the right bank of Don near Kherson, they actually took that decision and they withdrew. And we keep falling in the same thing. Popasnet, Lysychansk, and now again. We're always sending a message, Russians are losing a lot, they're not smart, we're killing thousands of them. Wagner is being destroyed. Oops, now we're semi-encircled, and then they're shooting through the area that we hold, but our people are heroes. And then later they bring artillery and just destroy our heroes. And since we announced this place to be a fortress, it's inconvenient for us to withdraw. So they're catching us for the fifth time. They did that in Ilovaisk, in Debaltsevo, in Donetsk airport before. According to military logic, one should have withdrawn a long time ago, but we were still continuing. Well, yeah, we had the same fault. We fell in the same trap with Hamas. What are they, right? Some bearded men with machine guns and little trucks. So, do you think Wagner trained Hamas terrorists? Let Israeli special forces figure it out. Generally, it's not an issue. It's easy because they touch each other in Syria and other places where they can communicate and train. So yeah, it could have been possible. Now, Alexey, we're getting official message that the number of hostages in Gaza is 229, and that's what we're learning as we're here on the stream. People are the investigative committee. They're looking at the people deceased. They're identifying them, and they're looking for those who are missing. And I think that's the main point, the main pain point why the ground operation hasn't started yet. So, if we go to Gaza now, this is the conundrum we're facing now. Go to Gaza and destroy Hamas or try to save hostages. In Israel, you have a protocol that treats what you need to do during capture of hostages, right? Well, yeah, it usually works at the moment of capture of the hostages, right? But this time passed. But this is a protocol that, just to tell our audience, that if the hostage is being taken, if a civilian, if a hostage is being, military is being captured, it allows Israeli military to kill both capturers, the terrorists, and if it will cause the collateral damage of the hostage, so be it. So they have this order, right? And given that, right, the international message that Israel actually cares about each soldier and allows them to tell military secrets, which is also a myth. Nobody allows soldiers to spill the actual data. So what's the nuance? If that person, if hostage is being captured, it will lead to more damage to the people of Israel than if the capturers, together with the person being captured, will be destroyed by Israelites themselves. So, speaking of hostages, you would be trading with Hamas for what, another 2 years, losing initiative, losing your face, losing position in the world, becoming an object of manipulations, not even from Jordan, not from Egypt or Iran, but being manipulated by those bearded assholes who are just killing you. Or when you come out and make a statement that you are starting a ground operation despite the risk to lives of hostages, because you cannot allow yourself to be an object of blackmail from a puny terrorist organization. And I am, as the Prime Minister of Israel, making a decision to risk the lives of hostages, even though one of the main goals of us entering Gaza will be to liberate them if we find them. And of course, I understand that part of them will perish, but this will be the cost of the ground operation. And if we don't do this operation, the consequences for us will be much worse. So I'm ready to meet with the relatives of hostages and talk to them in person. I promise you I will leave politics forever after this crisis. But right now I'm making this decision as the commander-in-chief of IDF, as the interest of our country and the interest of our people dictate that we should not be hostages of these situations ever again. We have to sacrifice, and I'm telling you, as the major of the special forces of Israeli military, which Netanyahu is, his brother, by the way, died also liberating hostages, right? So he can come out and say, this is my family's history too, I'm just like you in this regard. He actually said that already. He remembered about his brother. Then, yeah, Godspeed. But he did not say that he is eager to sacrifice part of hostages or all hostages, because in Israel that would have been taken as a ground, as an earthquake. Well, then you change the message a little. You need to say that you go to liberate the hostages, even though it may cause some of them to perish, but there are things you cannot live with. And there are some military here that are saying that, Alexey, that ground operation will allow us to liberate some hostages. Well, indeed, that actually gives a chance, because some anti-terrorist operations participants will be hostage liberation professionals. Now, hostages being captured for 3 weeks, they're not getting better, right? They were being taken hostage to exchange for captured Hamas fighters. So the logic still says the more Hamas fighters you capture, the more of them you can exchange for hostages. Maybe part of them you get them not even in Gaza, but somewhere else. But even if for some reason you don't finish the operation, you will at least end up with, I don't know, 3,000 captured Hamas fighters that you can change. Maybe fight for a week, 3 days, and then start the exchange process. And you need to explain that to your people. That's going back to strategic communications. And we do have, actually, Alexei, we do have terrorists in prisons. Sure, you can get more. If you exchange in a certain ratio, you can gather that ratio. There's got to be a logic why you're going to Gaza. You're going there to liberate hostages. Somebody mentioned exchanging one for 1,000, 229,000 Hamas fighters. We would not be able to feed that many. Yeah, if we change 1,000 for one, right? But you can at least exchange them. So, Alexey, thank you for joining. Thank you for coming to our stream. We stand with Ukraine, and our hearts are with you guys too in Israel. Alexey Arestovych, military political observer, was in the stream of the best radio. Thank you very much.